Hello, everyone. I'm Colin Tessier of WrestleZone.com, joined by John Clark tonight to talk about WWE NXT 2.0, a show that's all about big balls, John. That's the show that we're here to talk about tonight, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the eve of my return to an AEW show, and we get this, and it was a mixed show. We'll get into it, but the overview for me was a mixed show.
I would agree. I would tend to agree, although perhaps more positive than I've been for the past couple of weeks coming out of the show here. More things that I feel optimistic about going forward, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. We'll talk all about it before we do. Just want to remind you all, this show, like everything we do here, it's available on all of our platforms, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be, we've got you covered. So I guess the leading item here, John, is that Halloween Havoc is coming back in 3 weeks' time. Not next week, I guess, another week after that, and then it'll be time for that. Yes,
3 weeks from tonight.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
So it's a good amount of time to build up the card here. We have the likely main event somewhat set, although it could be changed depending on what happens next week. We'll talk about that, but we do know Tommaso Ciampa will defend the NXT title against Braun Breaker. We know that much, and Joe Gacy may or may not figure it out. We'll talk about that in a bit, but overall here, John, are you excited that Halloween Havoc's coming back? And at least sitting here today about the match between Ciampa and Breaker potentially.
Yes, so it appears that moving forward, instead of takeovers, we're going to get probably specials like every couple months, probably. So that's fine. I mean, it's a live TV version of Takeover. Maybe it'll bring them a good ratings boost. Maybe it won't. We'll see. That's probably the goal. But I mean, what do you think about this match? I mean, it's kind of predictable that we're getting this match between these two in the main event. Possibly a third one. I don't see it going that way. I think it'll probably stay a one-on-one match, but who knows? It would be if they really wanted to put the title on Braun Breaker. It would be interesting to put have him pin like Joe Gacy, like Braun Breaker, to put the title on him.
Exactly.
But yeah, is that where your head kind of is here, or what?
Yes, it is. First off, very, very glad the Halloween Havoc is coming back. A week ago, hadn't heard anything about it, and so I wasn't quite sure about why, or I should say, wasn't sure what they're going to do. No word on Takeover, no word on Halloween Havoc. I love Halloween Havoc. It's a fun seasonal event. It's October. It's spooky season, so I always love the pumpkin kind of head on the set. I think it's really been usually it's been one of the better shows of the year since NXT has been brought it back. I think last year was very, very good. This year, even with the 2.0 revamp here, I still expect it to be a very strong show. When they first announced it tonight, I thought that the card would be really, really solid, because they did announce that it will be Ciampa versus Breaker, and then they had set up Swerve Scott versus Santos Escobar for the North American title. I initially, for a second, thought that would be on Halloween Havoc. That one would be for next week. So, and that makes sense. We do know, we'll talk about it in a bit, we do know that Hit Row is heading over to SmackDown in the draft. Halloween Havoc is the 26th. The draft changes take effect the 22nd. So there you go. That makes sense, but also having this kind of continuous build up to Raquel Gonzalez defending her title against Mandy Rose. I could easily see that being on that card there. So I think we could still be in for a very, very good show. Without takeovers, I think this is a very, very good plan of attack. John, as you said, very easy way to, in theory, kind of pop a number where even if people don't necessarily watch the show every week, you can kind of bring in some of the more casual or part-time viewers, knowing that it will be a takeover-like show. So if that's another New Year's Evil show in January, maybe I don't know if they want to do a monthly thing, but I could see them doing a Vengeance Day kind of thing in February as well. They have options. I think this a Great American Bash, of course, in the summer as well. They have options here, so I think this is very, very good. And we've talked about it since the NXT revamp here, 2.0, I should say. Maybe kind of building up to the return of takeovers once you kind of really establish some of these names, because again, we've gotten so many new characters, so many new faces, and to kind of throw them onto a pay-per-view level show right away, May not be the best call there, but I think this is a very big idea. I'm very excited about it. Now, not to bury the lead anymore, but Joe Gacy might get out of this match. And Johnny, as you asked, I do think that will be the way it goes. It is interesting that he's facing Ciampa next week, the master of the safe space challenger again to a match. Yeah, and Ciampa said, "All right, you're on." Or I guess he said, "I want a title shot." And Ciampa said, "All right, if you can beat me next week, you'll get one." And then a couple minutes later, it turned out that he'd be added to the title match that I already announced. And I guess kind of surprisingly, I feel like Gacy is going to win it somehow. And John, you mentioned a minute ago, but then that would let him be the fall guy in that triple threat match with Breakker winning the title. I think that makes sense. I mean, I've been a big fan of Ciampa having the title again, having Goldie back, but with this 2.0 revamp, they're really, really emphasizing all these new faces. Breakker, more than anybody, is rapidly rising up the ranks here. So even though that will only be a little over a month since the launch of NXT 2.0. I feel like that's where we're going here. But more on Halloween Havoc. Furnish Nando saying he's glad Halloween Havoc is back. The AEW could benefit from their own Halloween theme show. Maybe call it Fright or Fight. I like that. That's a very clever idea there. Well, as I said, I like the seasonal shows here, especially with Halloween. It's just a very fun time.
I can, because I'll be at SmackDown just 2 nights before Halloween this year. And I can just imagine now seeing a trick-or-treat fight with Happy Corbin for hitting somebody over the head with a pumpkin on SmackDown. And
you can see it. You can see it. But while talking about Gacy here, Joe Gacy bringing the heat in his promos, talking about safe spaces, talking about Ciampa's male privilege as a champion. Definitely a controversial gimmick, to say the least here. I think it's working in the sense Corey Graves himself had said it on After the Bell, where it's like it's getting people talking. People are feeling feelings about this gimmick, and at the end of the day, that's kind of I guess it's all publicity is a good thing. Is a good thing at that point. So, but speaking of Gacy, he defeated Ickham and Gyro. Although this promo, he said basically like, oh, there can be 2 winners in the match. I'm like, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose? Like, we're going for winners and losers, all right? This is a wrestling match. Come on, man. But I like what we're going for, where it's like trying to solve things peacefully. He hugged Gyro after the match, and then, John, we saw the unannounced on TV at least debut of baby Brock Lesnar, Parker Boudreaux, but also now he's been renamed Holland. This man shaved his head. Unsettling to look at.
Absolute beast.
He looks like a monster. Well, I'm not gonna say it's overdue. People have been clamoring for this guy to debut for a while now. We've been getting comments about him. Gosh, I feel like it's been at least since the summer. Every time there was like a mystery debut, or when it was like the Recharging Battery, people thought it was him. Every single time, people were like, oh, it's gotta be Parker. And now Parker's here, looking like something. But DJ Tessier wondering why WWE has Parker looking like Uncle Fester from the Addams Family. I don't know. I do think that maybe part of the motive here is that they wanted to look a little different. The way his hair was, they looked a little too much like Brock Lesnar. So maybe trying to have him establish his own identity here. But he stared down Joe Gacy after the match. And though Gacy smiled back at him, so it feels like in some capacity these two guys are going to be working with each other. I was going to say working together. I don't know about that. But what do you think about Parker's debut here, and where we might be seeing him going in the near future?
I'm fine with it. I think they have kind of big things in store for him, sort of like Braun Breaker, but he might be not on a fast track. I'm going to give it a chance. I'd like to see his move set to see if he has more moves than the Great Khali had, but even maybe Brock Lesnar doesn't really have that many moves, but he's a big name, so that's okay. He can get away with it. This guy doesn't have really the benefit of being a big household name, so he's going to have to impress, kind of like Keith Lee as a big guy impressed and got himself over. We need to see something similar, I think. James asking if I think Parker will wrestle like Brock. I don't. I think it'll be a little different. Maybe some similarities, but I think he's going to try to mold his own his own move set here.
I agree. We were talking about it a little bit last night. Gable Steveson getting drafted to Raw in the draft. It was very easy to make comparisons with Kurt Angle. Brock Lesnar, another guy with that amateur wrestling background. Parker was a football player, so I think he'll be more kind of modeled in a general, I won't say generic, but a more general wrestling sense, not after Brock Lesnar, not after that amateur wrestling background, just more of a WWE trained wrestler, whatever that might look like. And yeah, I think they're absolutely going to want to kind of have him be his own guy. People are going to compare him to Brock anyway. They don't need to kind of lean into that by having him do the same moves or wrestle like him. But he's a big guy. I think there will be similarities regardless. But I mean, I think there will be. Yeah, I think that's other ways to say about it. But I think it's good. I think of some of these names here, he's got some of that, if not name value, or at least familiarity. Like a lot of even like casual WWE fans know who this guy is. He's got some buzz about him. And again, somehow,
believe it or not, thanks to Eva Marie. Yes. Out of all people, Eva Marie.
So there you go. Well, at least one good thing came out of Eva Marie.
Maybe we'll see.
Right. Hey, who knows? It could still fall flat on its face. But on top of that, as I said, many new faces here on NXT 2.0. Another one finally debuted tonight. Tony D'Angelo. It was Tony time in the Capitol Wrestling Center. This man got a promo tonight talking about how he solves problems when his family tells him, Tony, we got an issue. It's my horrible attempt at an accent. Forgive me, but my gosh, it was Tony time. And the crowd ate it up. This guy's out there wearing like sweatpants and a white tank top. People were chanting. He beat Malik Blade, who's been competing on 205 Live. Pretty straightforward. They look good, but the people are behind this guy. It feels like we could potentially kind of be seeing Tony D'Angelo pretty quickly rising up as like one of the at least proverbial faces of NXT 2.0. He's had a vignette every week. Like they're clearly kind of leaning into this guy, and the people are responding. John, what do you think about Tony D'Angelo's debut, and maybe like what we can kind of expect from him again, at least in the near future, going here in NXT?
I think we need to check in with Dominic and Marcus to see if they can give us an inside update of this guy. No, I think that he certainly has the potential and charisma to be pushed up the ranks. Look, here is what I think is very, I don't know if you call it interesting or unpredictable. So, the North American Championship has not been defended since June 29th, almost 3.5 to 4 months. And the champion is leaving NXT for SmackDown. So look, I think that this absolutely has to be vacated, and this absolutely has to be given, not given, but given a chance to become relevant again, like it kind of once was when like Ricochet had it and things like that. So there needs to be, and this truly needs to be the mid-card title of NXT. People like Tony, people like Holland that are fighting over our title, because it is nearly impossible to be less relevant than the Women's Tag Team Championships. And of course, DJ saying obviously Swerve is losing the title match. Tell us a little bit about this title match.
Well, I was just going to say, John, on paper, I would agree with you. The North American title has not been defended since, I get what you said, June, which is crazy. Not a good look for the brand's kind of secondary men's championship here, at least in a single sense. So I would agree. You see that situation. Okay, the champion's getting drafted to the main roster. They the title, do a tournament, or even just a one night kind of like fatal four way or something. But we do know, as we've seen for just weeks and weeks here, Hit Row and Legado del Fantasma have been feuding. We got some comments on Member last week. People were saying they're tired of this. Well, we didn't wait. It's going to be ending. Like Hit Row's getting drafted up to the main roster. That will take effect October 22nd. So come that day, I would expect that Hit Row will be over on SmackDown and not on NXT anymore. That means that this feud will be coming to an end. Again, Halloween Havoc will be the 26th. If the timeline fell out a little differently, I'd expect maybe like a stable versus stable match on that show. But I'm not quite sure exactly how this will conclude. It might end with this title match next week, because we do know Santos Escobar challenged Swerve to a title match, basically saying, "Oh, you're running away from me." Even though he got drafted, he didn't really choose. And then Swerve accepted, saying, "We're not running away from you. We're running to the money on SmackDown." But putting the title on the line finally. So we do know that'll be happening next week. Like I said, I thought that'd be on Halloween Havoc, but we don't have to wait. That will be next week. 100% for me. I really think, as DJ's saying, Swerve's going to be losing that. And for me, I think Santos Escobar is great. I really liked him as a Cruiserweight champion. For me, not a knock on the Cruiserweight title. I think this is a step up. Because as you said, John, the North American title has been prestigious in the past. It's been held by guys like Keith Lee, Ricochet, and several others here. So I think this will be good for him. I think he could really kind of help elevate it back to where it once was. The one interesting thing is when you have so many new faces on the show here, and when we're seeing Braun Breaker already challenging for the NXT title, when you see Joe Gacy at least have a chance to get in that title match, and as I said, I would expect him to get added to that title match. The hierarchy is interesting because it's kind of unclear who exactly is like the quote-unquote main eventers, who's the upper mid-carders, because like on paper, a guy debuts a month ago, he wouldn't necessarily be a main eventer already, but Braun Breaker is going to be the main event. So it is interesting, especially with this here. It's like I think Escobar is going to win, but who's going to be challenging him? Like who's really going to kind of step up here among some of these newcomers, guys that should be mid-carders or would be mid-carders? I think a guy like Cameron Grimes kind of slots in there. We saw him lose to Pete Dunne tonight in a good match, but that is interesting. 100%. I do definitely expect Swerve to lose there. Escobar will be a good champion. I think that's very, very good. John, I don't think either one of us will be crying over the spilled milk of Hit Row getting drafted to SmackDown here, but they'll still be. It's not like they're leaving, right? They're still going to be on SmackDown.
Well, I mean, I don't have to talk about them anymore.
Oh boy, but I will. I'll be talking about whatever happens with Hit Row on the SmackDown post show. I don't know, man. They cut a promo tonight and more of the same. But people like them, so not only people, the people who make the decisions like them because they're getting drafted to SmackDown, so they're doing something right. That much you gotta at least admit. So for me here, as I said a little earlier in the show, I felt pretty. At least we were talking about this before we went on the air. I felt kind of better than I had coming out of the show. Some of the new faces worked a little better for me. The matches were good. One thing I didn't like so much: severe lack of index. Dexter Lumis was not on the show whatsoever. Indy Hartwell was. She had a backstage segment with her new friend Persia, and they referenced index, and I thought this was good. They're talking about the now infamous honeymoon scene from last week, and Indy said that they went through 2 packets of the protection that Dexter brought to their hotel room. Fantastic stuff. And then Persia asked,
busy.
Persia asked, what is he, like a 7 or an 8? And Indy said he's a 9.5. Take that as you will. My gosh. And then Indy defeated Mei Ying, which was like that was pretty unexpected. And then spinning out of that, Indy Hartwell and Persia confronted Io Shirai and Zoe Stark. Pretty clearly looking like they might be challenging for the titles. So at least in NXT, we have a surviving women's tag title scene, unlike the main roster coming out of the draft. But I thought this was pretty good. DJ's asking how in the world Mei Ying lost to Indy. I mean, Persia got involved and kind of distracted her, so it wasn't like it was a 100% clean loss there. But definitely a little surprising when Mei Ying hadn't built up like a boss, and Indy beat her. What do you think about the idea that Indy and Persia might be at least challenging for the titles here?
I'm going with it. I really wish this would have been sooner because I think Io Shirai would have been useful up on the main roster. It's kind of weird how it's almost like, I mean, maybe Dexter just had a week off, but it's like they kind of just like dropped this now that it's like over with. It's kind of like now they're going to move on and go about business regularly. We'll see if it kind of picks back up here when Candace has the kid, and of course we'll see what plays out there. Kind of like Austin Theory just kind of like left, like just
right. He ran away
after the wedding. He was up and gone, and that was it. So
right.
We'll see how it ends up.
Hey John, if you go through 2 packets of that kind of protection, in a pretty brief span of
You
time.
need a
You're going
week
to need
off.
some time to
Okay.
recover,
All
John.
right.
My gosh, you're going to
Fair
need.
enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Oh my gosh, what this show is like. It's become so goofy, and I resisted it at first, but my gosh, it's I'm on board. It's a fun time. Michael Kent saying the women were the best part of NXT now, at least if not just tonight, maybe now in general. And we had a good tag team main event here. I just mentioned Indian Persia. We also had Mandy Rose defeating Ember Moon in the first match of the night. John, we talked about it last week. I remain very convinced Mandy Rose, at the very least, will at least challenge for the NXT Women's Championship. She confronted Raquel Gonzalez later in the show. So at bare minimum, I feel like we are heading toward that match, likely at Halloween Havoc. Mandy Rose and Toxic Attraction. Again, they said themselves here tonight. They said they're the faces of NXT 2.0. At least in the women's division, it's hard to disagree. And again, I feel like Mandy Rose could very well be the next NXT Women's Champion here.
I definitely agree, and like I said, I think it's because the teammates are going to play a key role in their dirty antics, and I just think that's what's going to happen. And this is another instance where I thought, well, Raquel Gonzalez would have been nice on the main roster, but at the same time, they did bring up Xia Li. They did, officially kind of make Shotzi and Tegan singles people. So maybe they don't need Raquel. Maybe they do. We won't really know until we've seen this new women's division play out for a little bit.
It is very weird that we talked about it last night on the Raw show. Very, very glad NXT was involved in the draft, but the way it was, Xia Li gets called up where she hadn't really been seen in several weeks. She was doing dark matches. Austin Theory, as you just mentioned, John, he had run away from the way, and he was doing dark matches as well. Ridge Holland is one exception. He's been on the show. He's been pretty prominently featured, and he will be getting called up to SmackDown. He was on the show tonight alongside Pete Dunn. So I think he's probably, and Hit Row, of course, another shining example of an act that's been featured on NXT and is getting called up. But yeah, you mentioned Raquel. Pete Dunn, another example. Dakota Kai, definitely one of the leading examples of people that you'd expect to get called up. Io Shirai, another one. Some of these kind of top level NXT stars that did not get called up. Definitely, at the very least, a little surprising that's kind of the direction that we saw in the draft. But I think, NXT is better for it if they get utilized properly. But what you mentioned that Toxic Attraction could or perhaps will have a deciding role in that title match, assuming it happens. But at least, maybe before that happens, Raquel will have some backup because Io Shirai and Zoe Stark made the save when Toxic Attraction tried to attack her tonight. Very clearly.
What I could see here I could see them doing like a 3-on-3 winner take all tag match. This strikes me as that kind of match where they could do that.
I could see that, especially because they've done it before. Back in the days when Bronson Reed was still on the brand, they did that with Reed and MSK. I think it was against Legado. I think that could be a way that you could have Mandy win the title without pinning Raquel. But then I think we talked about it back when they did that match. And then if you do a title change, it's very weird because the champion could lose the title without getting pinned, and that's part of the whole attraction. But logically speaking, it's a weird look where it's like then the person doesn't actually be the champion. But I could definitely see that. I think that'd be a good way to kind of, especially if we're imagining that might be on the Halloween Havoc card. That's an easy way to get them all on the card, where it's only a 2-hour show, and then you kind of combine them into one match. I could definitely see that, especially with that precedence there, or where it's happened before. So I like that idea. I think that'd be a good way to kind of progress, at least from what we saw tonight. But at the very least, I think we're going to get some kind of 6-woman tag team match here, because that's kind of the usual format we saw. Speaking of Halloween Havoc, Tim Hardy saying that he's very glad that it's back, saying he loves it. I would agree. It's what we were talking about earlier here. DJ Cassidy agreeing with your idea about putting all the titles on the line. Whoever wins, at the very least, I feel like that is definitely a logical way to go about it. DJ then wondering about putting the tag champions in a stable with Raquel to kind of combat Toxic Attraction. I could see that, but the problem is, and I think I saw a couple tweets about it, Io Shirai doesn't like anybody. Like she can't even get along with her own partner, with whom she's defending the tag titles, or was trying to. Putting her in a stable, that further complicates things. And I guess for dramatic effect, that could be interesting. It's like, for that very reason, she can't get along with anybody. But if you're trying to apply some logic to it, it's like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So I wouldn't. It was kind of. I think people have been asking about this months ago. When we saw Bronson Reed team with MSK, it's like, oh, they could form a stable. No, I think it will just be kind of a temporary alliance for convenience and for strength in numbers, kind of what he's saying, to even the odds. I think that's, or he says even the sides. I think that's what we're looking at. Not a matter of a stable formation, more just kind of convenience and a short-term deal kind of thing. But we've been talking all about some of these new faces here. Odyssey Jones had a match with LA Knight tonight, and before the match started, I really thought, all right, it feels like this is a match where Odyssey's going to win. Odyssey, much like Braun Breaker, and as we're seeing now, in some ways, a guy like Joe Gacy is becoming one of these at least proverbial faces of NXT 2.0. So you put him in there with LA Knight, a guy that, feels like one of the standard bearers, not standard bearers, one of the main guys from the previous version of NXT. Kind of felt like it was pretty clear he'd be losing, but instead, Andre Chase cost him the match, and LA Knight won. I thought that was the right call, but where it's like I predicted Austin Jones would win, not saying that was the right call, just more of a I think that's what's going to happen. I think this is good for LA Knight. I don't want to see him get lost in the shuffle among all his new faces, so I thought this was good. But DJ saying that Odyssey got screwed by Andre Chase. I said it last week. I think I mentioned it. But Andre Chase, like dark horse for like the best character we're seeing here, where it's like he's got like the Chase U, and he's like got the classroom vignettes, and like this he's like this coach / teacher kind of thing. I think it's pretty fun. I'm liking it. And as we talked about last week, we're getting these characters, these storylines, and again, you know who these people or at least who these characters are. And that's a very, very good thing. That is definitely a step in the right direction. And with that, you have these kind of more, I don't know, it's easier to invest in these feuds. And then you see more of it. It's more of an emphasis on storytelling. So I like that. They're blowing that up. I could maybe see this being a Halloween Havoc, but maybe just more of a standard TV match. But I think it's fun. I have no problem with that. I mean, I like the feud. It's good for Odyssey. Presumably he'll win. Get a little more steam here going in NXT. Whereas for Andre Chase, it gets him on TV and it at least builds up his character. I think he could quickly become like a Cameron Grimes, where he's like he doesn't need to win. He's just a fun character. So, what do you think about this match with Odyssey and LA, and potentially this seemingly ongoing feud with Odyssey and Andre Chase?
I really like Odyssey. I think he has the potential to be something special. He also reminds me of somebody that could be like Keith Lee. Andre Chase, while a good character, still rings me as the kind of character that's like a joke. Like he doesn't ever win. Like he's not a viable threat.
Right.
So I don't know how I think about that. But putting them together, I think this would benefit Odyssey to come out on top. Andre Chase, I mean, it's kind of like he's like what Kushida was, because Kushida was losing all of his matches, but he was still featured. Speaking of which, who we haven't seen in like forever either. But yeah, I'm good with this. Odyssey Jones coming out on top would be ideal.
Yeah, and I would agree, and I think that's exactly it. At least for now, Andre Chase is that. Definitely not enhancement talent, but definitely like a guy that you don't really expect to see win. He's more it's the character, and he just helps other people get more established.
He's kind of like what Elias was on the main roster, because he had charisma, but he was losing every single match he was in.
Yeah, I think that's a very good comparison. So, and again, that definitely feels like more of this emphasis here on NXT. It's about the characters. Even when they're not winning matches, they're getting those characters established. So then, if they get over. You just mentioned Elias. Elias, it's not like he had the most successful NXT run, but the character got over, so he got called up to the main roster, and he's, at least until he quote-unquote died a couple of weeks ago.
I like this comment from Tim Hardy. He says, this new NXT feels like WWF superstars in the 90s, and I love that. This does have that feel that they're basically, like you mentioned last night about Raw, they're throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. They're being unique. They're being creative. They're doing all kinds of different things to see what will be successful. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, it worked in the 90s with multiple people.
It's such an interesting, like, vibe to the show and in general like structure and setup and just general like we were talking about the storytelling and the characters, that is very much like it feels like a WWE Superstars in the 90s, more of a, or at least generally speaking, old school kind of thing. And then on the flip side, you got people talking about balls, condoms, you got the woman dressing more provocatively, let's say,
very more,
and that seems very intentionally so. And we've had reports that they are trying to be more intentionally edgy and just attitudinal, for lack of better words. So this weird hybrid of that like early 90s kind of era and like late 90s and even the ruthless aggression era, all combined in this one weird hodgepodge of traits. And to, I guess in a way, that's created its own identity. Where it at times leans into each one, but overall it is a combination. I think that's a good thing, and maybe that's why, as I said, I came around a little at least today, where I was like, all right, I can get behind that. It's like you got an Index doing fun stuff, you still have good matches, you have the storytelling and the characters, and again, because those characters, again, you have a guy like Tony D'Angelo, Andre Chase, the very like, if not stereotypes, at the very least, like an emphasis on who they are, so that you can know who you're watching. So then you have a Joe Gacy having a match after he has a promo. It's like, all right, I know who this guy is. I know why I should or should not be cheering them. And there you go. Very basic stuff that sometimes gets taken for granted on the main roster. So I definitely like the comparison from Tim there that it feels like the 90s and the early 2000s, as I said. So it is a weird time. I mentioned a bit ago, but Cameron Grimes did have a match here against Pete Dunne. Thought it was good. Pete had a pretty sick counter to the cave in where he like bounced Grimes into the ropes and then counter that into the bitter end. And for me, I kind of laughed to myself because the announcers like really hyped up like, oh, it's the bitter ending, and I just thought like, in a world where Pete Dunne gets called up to the main roster, I could so easily see him getting if he ever like faces Big E, having a line like, oh, you might hit the big ending, but it's not gonna be like the bitter ending or something like that. That's the very WWE thing. This is a fun match though. DJ was asking who the blonde was backstage because now of Cameron Grimes. Speaking of characters here, Grimes is now trying to be a ladies' man. Where he said, like we have Index, we have Cora Jade and Trey Baxter, kind of as another couple here. And he said, I'm trying to find my own lucky lady. And then he was hitting on some people backstage. I didn't hear anything about who that was. It might have just been kind of a local talent, quote unquote, someone that just kind of picked up for the night. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was like a actual debut or anything. I could be wrong. I don't know. I like it. What we're talking about. Grimes, definitely a guy that's all about that character. He's great in the ring as well. I think he's an exception. But definitely he's a very strong character. And now he's kind of evolving from, the $1 million champion. We saw him as a heel, then a babyface. Now he's going off into this more ladies' man kind of thing. Worst case scenario, I think it'll produce some fun segments and whatnot. So that's fine. I think it's whatever. But speaking of Cora Jade here, Cora Jade picked up a big win over Frankie Monet, and I think they're hyping it up as the era of Jade or something like that. Frankie Monet here did have, I think, more of an aggressive side like that. So I thought it was a good match until she lost, and I was like, oh, okay. And this is the one thing about NXT 2.0 here. It's where you have a lot of these kind of more established people getting, I don't say the short end of the stick, but it's like you have Frankie here where like, what was that last week she lost to Raquel, yes. and then here you go, she's losing to Cora Jade, and Cora Jade's in-ring debut. Upsets happen, that's fine, like that is obviously it's a thing, but it definitely did strike me by surprise where Frankie was more aggressive and it feels like she was kind of leaning more into that, and then Cora won. And all right, but DJ Garcia is saying Cora Jade, formerly known as Elena Black, upsets Frankie Monet, also known as Vera Loca. I think that means like super crazy. Ty Valkyrie, huge shock to me since following Jade's career. She never got the big one, never won the big ones on the independent scene. Now she's getting what she deserves, and she's a great talent. Seems good. I'm not very familiar with her. I know she had a good following on the independent scene, but this was her in-ring debut on NXT. So, It was a good one. It was, yeah, as while I was a little upset about Monet losing, only because I think that she's that talented, and that she could or should be the next women's champion. Beating her is definitely that speaks good for Cora Jade, where now she just beat the person that challenged for the title last week, so feels like that she might be maybe, if not fast tracked, at least kind of hitting the ground running here in NXT. But do you have any thoughts on Cora Jade's debut, John?
No, I just think that the way they did it, it was fine, to look impressive like that. But it's so hard to judge somebody just on their first night in the show because it could turn out very well or it could turn out very bad. So it's like the debut essentially doesn't really mean anything if they can't capitalize in the weeks and months after.
It's true. It's true. It could be this is in one night a good showing, but really the more important part is what comes next, whether they can capitalize, and that's what we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, at least for one night, a good start here. So let's see. Otherwise, here we had a continuation of, as I mentioned, Rich Holland a minute ago, where he Dunn defeated Cameron Grimes, and then Kyle Reilly attacked Holland ringside, and then he made the very poor decision of attacking both guys after the match by himself, after telling Von Wagner basically, let me handle this, stop helping me. And Von Wagner didn't help him, and Kyle got his butt beat. But then during a commercial, Von Wagner came out and helped him to the back. And from there, we got a tag team match for next week: Von Wagner, Kyle Reilly versus Pete Dunne and Ridge Holland. Again, Von Wagner definitely, it's already seeming like one of those guys where they're kind of leaning into him. First night he was on NXT, he got an NXT title shot. So definitely, as I mentioned earlier, it's hard to tell exactly what the tiers are. It's like who's the main eventer and whatnot. And maybe that doesn't matter so much when you've got so much of the roster being so new and kind of unknown. But at very least, I feel this feels like a borderline main event where Kyle Reilly's been a guy who's challenged for a title, and now he'll be teaming with Von Wagner against Pete Dunne, another guy that's been in the main event scene. So I think this will be another good chance for Von Wagner to make a name for himself.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that they are featuring him more and more on TV because they have high hopes, and I think he has the potential. Tim Hardy says not seeing what they see in Vaughn. I hope he grows on me, but it's not clicking for me as of yet. Kind of like how we thought about Hit Row, huh?
Yeah, I mean, hey, as I said, Hit Row's getting called up to SmackDown. We have been here week after week, not quite getting it, but plenty of people are. Plenty of people are more on board with it and liking it. So fine, if they're liking Von Wagner. I saw at least one report where people backstage really think highly of him. I'm like, all right, it's fine. Obviously, I'm not the guy making decisions or anything like that. But again, maybe next week it would click. I don't know. It's been fine. I'm not like actually against it or anything, but I do think it was a little aggressive to have him get a title shot the very first night, without having ever seen him before, at least for me personally. But nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. Speaking of Kyle O'Reilly, Tim Hardy saying that Kyle needs to go to SmackDown. He feels stale on the new NXT. I mean, we're talking about the drafts. Definitely guys like Kyle O'Reilly, Pete Dunne. We named a couple others before. Definitely felt like they were seemingly, or they should have been, on a short list for people to get drafted. Instead, nope, they're still on NXT. Kyle, it feels like short of winning the NXT title, he's done everything he can. So I thought he would be one of the guys that could get drafted, and he didn't. So I think that's a very fair point. But maybe this storyline with Von Wagner could kind of give him at least something to do in the meantime, and we'll go from there. But Kyle O'Reilly, Tim thinks is a little stale. Something that's not stale is Diamond Mine. John, finally, months into this thing, we finally got a video promo where Malcolm Bivens did what I thought they should have done, if not the first week, at least the second week, and just really described who each person is, why they're, if not a big deal, at least why they're in Diamond Mine in the first place. Even the coach, playing on his name, but Hachiman, I think that's Hachiman. Yes. Hideki Suzuki is formerly known as. This was good. Like, DJ Gasset Plant was a good promo, saying the teacher's better than Tom Brady. I mean, it's Roderick Strong. I don't know if he's Tom Brady level, but he's pretty darn good. You can't dispute that. He's a reigning cruiserweight champion, so that's good. But I thought this was good. I thought that this was shot nicely. It looked pretty. It was shot pretty. Like it looked like a good, like legit video package here. Ivy Nile, the Creed Brothers. Some spoilers go out there. We do the Creed Brothers will be in action on 205 Live as a team, so that's something to look forward to. I think they've got a lot of potential. In general, maybe they could be. Sooner and later, at least challenges for the NXT tag titles here, but I thought this was good. Again, overdue, but at least now it's okay. Now we know who these people are. Now it's not just Roderick Strong and his merry band of physically imposing, not misfits, but you know what I mean. I thought this was good. I just now you have kind of more, again, this very strong emphasis on character, and maybe this is a benefit of NXT 2.0. Diamond didn't really get that character emphasis previously in the old NXT, but now that's exactly what the NXT is all about. So I think that's good. And again, dating back to the 90s comparisons, Tim Hardy saying that Malcolm Bivens is incredible, and the vignettes are very 90s-esque WWF, and that's great. I would agree. So it's good. Yeah, I like it. And yeah, I wasn't criticizing DJ for comparing him to Brady. No, I didn't catch that line, but no, of course, like they can say he's better than Brady. And that's a heel thing to do. They said something else. Oh, Lash Legend had a brief promo about her Lashing Out talk show, and she said something like, "Oh, people were buzzing about me so much that it crashed Facebook yesterday." I was like, "Get out of here! Get out of here! No." But heels do that.
Yeah.
Again, these are things that you see in wrestling, and it's fine. I thought it was a little silly, and it's again a little silly to call Roderick Strong better than Tom Brady, which is what they did, not DJ here, but. Yeah, it's a goofy show. I'm mostly here for it. I'm coming around, but the only thing we haven't really talked about is the main event tag team title match. This was supposed to be an 8-man tag team match, and then randomly, I think it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday, they changed it to a fatal 4-way elimination tag team match. So, good to have the tag titles on the line. MSK hasn't had. I mean, they have had a successful run. They've had title matches. They haven't really had a real feud. So that has been great. Maybe now that we've got more of, again, that very character-heavy emphasis here, maybe they'll get it. So we had MSK defending the titles against Trick Williams and Kamala Hayes, and against the team of Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen. It is so hard to keep track of all these names. There's so many faces here. And also... the Girls Only Veterans, the one team that's not newcomers there. But no, I thought this was a good match. NXT does tag team matches very, very well, especially when you throw in 4 teams. It's crazy. It's a good time. MSK wins. Surprisingly, Grizzly and Veterans were eliminated by Brooks Jensen and Josh Briggs. So Briggs and Jensen were the last team standing. And this is what we talked about early in the show with LA Knight here. I did not expect Grizzly and Veterans to get eliminated like that. I thought they'd kind of be the last team standing, at least as the challengers, and then kind of recreate their feud with MSK. Brooks and Jensen eliminated them, and they got that last shot there. And they lost, but it was a good showing. But as Michael Covenant's saying, Girls and Young Veterans yet again getting treated like chopped liver. They're always the bridesmaids, never the bride. I've made that comparison before. They got to the finals of the Dusty Cup, they lost. I think they faced MSK before for the titles, lost. So I think that's a very valid point. He's like, he loves MSK. This crowd was not loving MSK. They were booing MSK. And then after Imperium attacked MSK after the match, they were chanting, "Thank you, Imperium." It's like, my gosh, a bunch of bloodthirsty people. And again, I don't know why people are so down on MSK. I think they're a fun team.
MSK has not had the best luck on the NXT roster so far. They started out fairly hot, but then they just kind of lost all their momentum to the point where I think they don't really have a whole lot of charisma. People are just kind of over it. People aren't really on board with it anymore. And then not to mention these changes in NXT where they're literally not signing people like MSK anymore. So... and I said weeks ago that I thought Kushida was going to get lost in the fold. He certainly did get lost in the fold. MSK might not be far behind. I don't see them. I just don't see them being the champions for very long.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree. Again, don't know why people are down on MSK. It's funny. I listened to an interview with them, not a WWE TV interview. This was with a Fightful, so it was not like on TV, but they seem like likable, good dudes, like, you know, nice people. They seem like they had natural charisma, and that's just not maybe that's not translating to the TV, to the characters. Maybe that's the problem, because they're so good in the ring, flying around, doing crazy stuff. People like that. We see Reggie doing flips on Raw. People love flips. So I don't know. Like, I don't know why people are down on them. DJ Cassier saying maybe people just want them to go back to Impact. I don't know about that. I mean, they had a good start to their run. People liked them at first, and somewhere along the way, this kind of turned on them for whatever reason. But I will say, I mentioned Imperium did attack MSK. You know, I tweeted about it saying put the titles on Imperium. It's time. I more meant it's not time today, but like build up to it and do it. And because we've seen Imperium, they're one of the few like actually established teams here, other than MSK, other than Grizzly Young Veterans. But I feel like we could be kind of in for multiple title changes, especially with Halloween Havoc coming up. Not too crazy to think about Braun. I mean, it seems crazy, but based on what we've seen, I feel like Braun Breaker is going to win the title. Maybe, again, especially by pinning Joe Gacy if he gets out of the match. If you got that one, I very much expect Swerve Scott to lose till next week to Santos Escobar. Whenever Raquel versus Mandy does happen, I am pretty convinced we might see a title change there. And now you factor in the tag titles. I mean, whether it's Imperium, whether it's Briggs and Jensen, I feel like we could be looking at kind of like a clean sweep of
and
title
the women's
changes.
tag titles.
Yeah, you know, factor in them as well. Maybe Toxic Attraction will get a rematch and win, or
The only one that's safe is Roderick Strong.
Yeah, and as he should be. I think he should enjoy a nice, good reign with a title there. So a mostly clean sweep of title changes, maybe to kind of really emphasize this revamp, this everything new NXT here. DJ asking if Briggs and Jensen saved MSK after Imperium attacked them. I didn't think Briggs and Jensen were heels. They seemed like more of a, you know, tough guy, like bar fighters. Like faces. Like, I didn't think they were heels in the first place, but if they were, I definitely think that's a very clear sign of a face turn. So maybe Imperium will face Briggs and Jensen first to kind of set that up. As I said, they need to be built up first. But I've been seeing Imperium's faces for a while now, so I definitely do hope that they at the very least get a title shot and ideally win. So Nando asking before we rate the show here, if Braun does win, is it a sign of guys like Ciampa and Joe getting phased out? Oh yeah. Like, for better or worse, whether it's right or wrong, NXT 2.0 is, we've talked about it all show long tonight. The last week, the week before that, is all about the new faces here, and part of that inherently, you know, by emphasizing the new faces, whatever, you know, new is in, out, or old is, if not out, at the very least, kind of pushed to the back of the line and out of the spotlight there. So, you know, yeah, it's weird. Ciampa won the title because Joe had to relinquish it. When that happened, I thought he would get a good run with it, and then suddenly Braun Breaker, overnight, you know, sensation, comes along, and I feel like that's where we're going. You mentioned Samoa Joe. When he does come back, I think he'll at least have maybe a short run. If he can come back, we don't really know what's going on there. But yeah, then you think of a guy like Johnny Gargano. His contract's expiring. We don't know what's going to happen there, but that's another factor as well. We were talking about Kyle O'Reilly earlier. It does feel like, yeah, you know, kind of maybe at least a little gradually, some of these real standard bearers might be getting phased out, and that's crazy. But then I guess in a way it almost makes sense, because a guy like Adam Cole leaves, then 2.0 comes along, and there you go. It's a new dawn. It's a new day in NXT here, and like I said, to wrap it up here, I was more on board this week. I thought this was a bounce back show for me. You know, I've been pretty critical of NXT 2.0 at points, but this was good. I'm kind of gelling with characters a little more. I'm liking the general kind of vibe a little more, at least. Maybe not quite loving the gratuitous ball jokes and whatnot, but hey, it tracks. We had Drew McIntyre call himself Big D on Raw last night, so you know. Maybe it's just definitely trying to be across the board a little more edgy, for lack of a better word. But I thought this was good. It was definitely a step in the right direction. So for me, if I had to rate it, 7.3. I think it's kind of my slightly above average score generally here. But John, what do you think of the show tonight?
I am going to give tonight's show a flat 7 out of 10. I thought it was a fairly decent show, but at the same time, I thought that the build to Halloween Havoc is kind of, and this is kind of me predicting more than anything, a little lackluster. We'll see. They only have 3 weeks. We only have one match. It's going to be one of those quick builds. We only have one match so far, right? I think.
Official, yeah. They've
Yeah, that's
officially
what I meant.
announced Breaker versus Ciampa, and they were just kind of hinting at or building towards some others.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see just kind of like, well, how deep are they going to get here as far as replacing old talent with new? I mean, it's crazy to think that after all of this, last couple months, I'm going to be seeing a show tomorrow that's a different company that's going to have both Adam Cole and Bobby Fish and Andrade and
And
Bryan Danielson on it.
and maybe Malachi Black, or at least in some capacity.
Yes.
It's crazy.
So,
It's a crazy time. That's a very good point. You know, the times they are changing. Not to give the show a 7.3 as well. DJ giving it a 9. Following up with a question as well, saying, is there an NXT star you think should have been drafted that wasn't, or that was drafted that shouldn't have been? I mean, we were talking about, again, guys like Kyle O'Reilly would have made sense. Raquel Gonzalez, again, some of the more, we were just talking about a minute ago, some of those maybe older faces that if they're getting phased out anyway, why not call them up and like have them actually move on rather than getting lost in the shuffle, left off TV entirely? Like, I don't know. I think that the same argument holds there, where it's like Kyle O'Reilly, Raquel, just all of that whole group, really. But for anybody that got drafted that shouldn't have been, not necessarily. I thought it was cool that Ridge Holland got drafted. I looked it up yesterday, pretty much almost exactly like a year after he suffered that freak accident last year on NXT. Pretty much just about a year later, he gets drafted. That's pretty darn cool. Zia Lee, we saw good things from her. But again, the weird thing was that some of these people that got drafted weren't on TV in recent weeks. So it's like they're not exactly hot, or they don't have a lot of momentum. It's like they're kind of coming in cold in that sense. Again, but Ridge Holland is one exception where it's like he's been on TV. So that makes a little more sense here. But what do you think about people that either should or should not have been drafted here from NXT here?
Dakota Kai is the one that I thought should have definitely been drafted. As far as who was and who shouldn't have been, I mean, really isn't anybody. I mean, I guess I would categorize Ridge Holland on there because I think Pete Dunne should have came with him, maybe.
I agree.
But
Yeah.
nobody really that got drafted. I was like, oh, this is a horrible decision. But there definitely was some questionable things that I thought it could have been a little better. But
I was very, very close to making a joke about Hit Row, but I won't. As I said, they're doing something right. People are getting behind them. The people that are making decisions are behind them. So good for them. I'm sure that they'll be just fine on SmackDown. They'll be doing good things, and that's good. So Michael Compton giving the show an 8 here, and Tim Hardy is as well. So it seems like people are fairly liking the show tonight. So like I said, I was more on board with it. I feel more positive coming out of it here. Hopefully the ratings will reflect it tomorrow. The ratings were like pretty rough last week. So again, what really matters is put on a good show. But obviously it's a business. So if WWE sees numbers not looking so good, they will sometimes rush to judgment. So hopefully the numbers will be better tomorrow. And I think you put on a good show. I think that's a good first step. So regardless of what the numbers are, we'll be back here to talk about NXT next week. Here again on Tuesday night. John, you and I here on Monday nights to talk about Monday Night Raw. Otherwise, here, John, you'll be at the AW show tomorrow, and I will be doing the AW 2 Down Dudes of Rampage tomorrow night with Dominic and possibly Marcus. I'm not quite sure all the specifics, but we get to be talking about AEW, so that's a fun time. Otherwise, Robert Duplessis and I will be here on Friday, talk about Friday Night SmackDown. We've got a great stream of interviews constantly coming, you guys. My interview with Fandango, or I guess formerly known as Fandango, now known as Dirty Dango, will be going up tomorrow on Wednesday. I guess you'll look out for that. Bill Pritchard recently interviewed the director of the New Day Undertaker movie on Netflix. All these things and more. Tons of interviews, tons of post shows, tons of great stuff constantly coming at you on all of our platforms, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be. We've got you covered. So tonight, John, I can say more easier than other nights. I did the one thing we do here at WrestleZone, and going forward here, can you tell me the one thing we do here at WrestleZone across whatever company you support, whatever show you like. We try to do one thing above all others, John. Can you tell me what that is?
Appreciate and enjoy wrestling.
You're darn right. Thanks for listening, everybody.